I've studied America's weapons. I've examined China's arsenal. I've read the numbers, the firepower, the reach, and every time the story sounded the same. America overwhelming budgets, unmatched military spending, China rapid growth, expansion, ambition. But when I turned my attention to India, I found something the world never expected. Not the biggest budgets, not the most expensive toys of war, but something far more dangerous. Brilliance. Weapons not just made of steel but of vision, not born in noise but in silence, not created to conquer but to endure. This is what shocked the world. Because superpowers like the United States and China assumed India would always remain behind. Too poor, too slow, too complicated. But they didn't see what was coming, a storm that was silent, smart, and unstoppable. Today I want to take you on a journey into the 10 weapons of India, some military, some technological, and some spiritual, that left even the most powerful nations speechless. Weapons that proved one truth: India may be calm but never weak. Let's begin with speed. You see, in modern warfare, speed kills. And India built something the world wasn't ready for. BrahMos. The BrahMos is not just another missile. It is the fastest supersonic cruise missile in the world, flying at Mach 3, 3 times the speed of sound. But speed alone is not what makes it terrifying. It's speed with precision. Imagine this, a missile skimming the earth at low altitude, almost invisible to radar. So fast that by the time your systems detect it, it's already too late. Even US defense analysts admitted, if BrahMos is launched, you won't see it coming. And here's what makes it more dangerous. BrahMos can be launched from anywhere. From the land, from the sea, from the air, and soon from submarines. In war, flexibility is power. BrahMos gave India not just speed but reach. And the West was not just surprised. They were studying it because this wasn't expected from a so-called developing country. But India never cared about expectations. It cared about results. If BrahMos is speed, then Arient is silence. Most nations that hold nuclear weapons keep them above water, visible, vulnerable, predictable. India did something different. It built in Arient, India's first indigenously made nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine. Think about that for a moment. A submarine that can carry nuclear weapons. A submarine that can remain hidden under the ocean for months. A submarine that ensures no enemy can ever destroy India in a single strike. This is called second strike capability. It means if India is ever attacked first, it can still end the attacker. This is not aggression, this is balance. This is strategy. NSA Hunt shocked defense experts around the world because it wasn't announced with fanfare. India didn't boast. India just built, and that silence was louder than any military parade. But India's weapons are not all about destruction. Some are about inspiration. Some are about imagination. Take Chandrayaan. When the world spends billions to reach the moon, India did it with one of the smallest budgets in history. Just $75 million, less than the cost of a Hollywood superhero movie. And yet, India became the first country in history to land on the moon's south pole. NASA watched. Elon Musk congratulated, and the world realized something profound. India doesn't waste. India executes. This was more than science. It was a declaration. We are here, and we will do it our way. The message to superpowers was clear. You may have bigger budgets, but we have bigger discipline. You may spend more, but we achieve more. Chandrayaan wasn't just a scientific success. It was a psychological shockwave. And then comes fire. The HNYV intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of over 5,000 kilometers. It can reach most of Asia, Europe, and even parts of the United States. But here's the twist. India never uses it to threaten. It never parades it as a tool of intimidation. Instead, the message is calm, almost quiet. We do not attack, but we will never be bullied. And that right there is what shakes superpowers, because real power is not loud. Real power is ready. These first 4 weapons, BrahMos, Hunt, Chandrayaan, and Agni, are only the beginning. They show you India's philosophy. Precision, balance, efficiency, confidence. But what comes next is even more shocking because India didn't stop at speed, silence, or space. It began building weapons the world had no idea were even possible. Weapons born of innovation, weapons built not in foreign factories but in India itself. India was always known as a buyer of weapons. Nations sold and India purchased. But then something changed. India decided it would no longer just depend on others, it would create. And when creation began, the world didn't laugh for long. Take the fighter jet, Teachers. At first, many dismissed it as too small, too weak, too slow. But when it finally took to the skies, those same voices went silent. Agile, combat ready, built entirely in India. Pilots call it the pocket rocket. Enemies call it unpredictable. For the first time, India showed the world that it was not just a customer in the defense market, it was a creator. And in war, creation is always stronger than dependence. Because when you can make your own weapons, you are truly free. But India didn't stop there. Missiles can destroy. But what if you could stop a missile before it even reached you? That's where India stunned the experts again. A two-layer air defense system capable of tracking and intercepting ballistic missiles mid-flight. Imagine the enemy launching a weapon, confident in destruction, only to watch it vanish in the sky, destroyed before impact. Quiet, clean, efficient. Most nations only dream of this technology. India built it, and once again, India didn't shout about it. It simply kept working. Then came something even more unusual. Rudram, India's first indigenous anti-radiation missile designed not to hit tanks or bunkers, but to blind. It targets enemy radars, communication systems and jamming centers. Before the enemy can even fire, their eyes are closed, their ears are gone. Their systems are silent and all of it delivered from the skies with speed and accuracy. One missile and an entire battlefield can be left in darkness. What shocked the world most was not that India built these things. It was how India built them. Not with unlimited budgets, not with endless resources, but with focus, with discipline, with determination. While others wasted money showing their strength on television screens, India invested quietly in laboratories, in research, in young minds who asked one question, not what to buy, but what to build. And soon the world realized something dangerous. A nation that learns to make its own fire no longer fears the dark. Modern wars are no longer fought with just bullets and bombs. They are fought with information, with signals, with silence. And India knew this before many of its rivals did. Inside secret labs, India's scientists worked on something that doesn't explode, doesn't fire, doesn't roar. Yet it is one of the most powerful weapons in existence. Electronic warfare. A suite of systems designed to jam enemy radars, confuse their communications, mislead their missiles. Imagine an enemy sending a jet into battle, confident of their targeting systems, only to watch the screens blur, the signals vanish, the guidance collapse. That's what India quietly built. An invisible shield. One that doesn't just protect, but attacks in silence. In the modern battlefield, controlling the signal is often more powerful than controlling the skies. And India had found a way to control both. But while electronic warfare protected from the unseen, India was also preparing for an entirely new battlefield, cyberspace. While most of the world still thought of war as tanks and planes, India understood that the next great war could be fought through codes and clicks. So it began building one of the fastest growing cyber defense infrastructures on Earth, protecting billions of identities, deploying artificial intelligence at its borders, training digital soldiers who could defend the nation not with rifles but with algorithms. And what shocked global intelligence communities most was this. The people leading this new army were not generals with decades of experience. Many of them were under 30, young coders, young engineers, young minds who refused to be outsmarted. These were India's invisible warriors, creating firewalls, intercepting intrusions, striking back against cyber attacks with speed the world hadn't seen before. America was watching. China was nervous and India was moving silently, relentlessly. But among all these machines, among all these codes and circuits, there exists a weapon no superpower has ever been able to replicate. A weapon not forged in factories but in spirit. The Indian soldier. A man who stands guard at the highest battlefield in the world. Siachen, where temperatures fall below -40 degrees, and yet he remains unshaken. A woman who serves in deserts on ships in command posts not for wealth, not for conquest, but for duty. A soldier who fights not to expand borders, but to protect them. The world could not understand this. How do you measure sacrifice? How do you calculate courage? How do you prepare for an enemy who does not fear death? Because he fights not for himself, but for his people. The Indian soldier is not programmed. He is not manufactured. He is not replaceable. And that spirit is India's greatest defense. The West expected India to break under pressure, to bend under threats, to remain silent under intimidation. But every time the line was crossed, India answered with precision. From the surgical strikes across the border to the Balakot air strikes deep into enemy territory, India proved it could strike fast, clean, and decisive. And after the strike, it didn't boast. It didn't shout. It went back to work. That calm response shook the world more than any show of force ever could, because true power does not crave attention. True power is silent until it is needed, and when it moves, it leaves no doubt. This was the moment the world realized India's greatest weapon is not its missiles, its submarines, or its jets. It is its mindset. A mindset of balance, of restraint, of quiet strength. India does not seek dominance, it demands dignity. And dignity defended with discipline is more terrifying than any bomb. The world was beginning to see a new truth. India was not a follower. It was not a customer. It was not a dependent. India was a builder, a creator, a nation that could design, produce, and deploy everything it needed, from missiles to moonlanders, from fighter jets to cyber shields. And when a nation learns to build for itself, it no longer bows to anyone. And that is why, for the first time, America began to pay attention. Not because India was loud, but because it was quiet. Not because it copied, but because it created. Not because it threatened, but because it endured. The world measures power in numbers. Number of missiles, number of jets, number of ships. But India showed that power is not only in numbers, it is in will. And that will has been tested for thousands of years. When the West first looked at India, they saw weakness. They saw poverty. They saw division. They saw a country too busy with its own struggles to ever rise. And yet quietly, India rose piece by piece, weapon by weapon, mission by mission. Not in the glare of television cameras, but in the silence of long nights, in the patience of decades, the same patience that built temples out of stone, the same discipline that wrote scriptures and forests, the same spirit that stood unbroken through invasions and empires. That spirit had now returned not only in culture, but in science, in technology, in defense. Consider India's space program. When the world mocked it as too ambitious, too poor to dream of stars, India placed satellites in orbit at a fraction of the cost others demanded. And then, with Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan, India did what richer nations could not. Reaching Mars in its very first attempt, landing on the moon's south pole where no one else dared. And the question on everyone's lips was not how, but how so cheaply, how so effectively, how so fast. That was India's true shock to the world. That genius needs no billions, it needs vision. The same vision flowed into defense, submarines that move silently beneath the oceans, aircraft carriers designed to project power on distant waters, drones that watch silently from the skies, hypersonic missiles in development, promising speeds the world can barely imagine. And behind all of it, the same determination. We will build, we will endure, we will rise. But above machines, above inventions, above technology, there is something more dangerous that India revealed, a philosophy. While the world prepares weapons to conquer, India prepares weapons to protect. While the world seeks to dominate, India seeks balance. And that philosophy terrifies superpowers because it means India does not fight for greed, it fights for survival. And survival makes any nation unstoppable. That is why India's rise is not just a story of missiles and machines. It is a story of dignity. It is a story of a people who refused to stay broken. A story of a civilization that turned wounds into wisdom and wisdom into weapons. Weapons not always of steel, but of spirit. Not always of fire, but of patience. And when the world finally saw this, it was not just America that was shocked. It was everyone. Shocked by how India moved from silence to strength. Shocked by how a nation they once called weak now builds weapons. Others cannot. Shocked by how India redefined power not as conquest but as endurance. The message was clear. India will not be bullied. India will not be ignored. India will not bow. And when a nation like that stands tall, the world has no choice but to watch. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon of all is a nation that refuses to give up. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe, my friends.